Welcome to the HR Uprising Podcast. This podcast series explores HR hot topics and challenges through conversations with relevant experts and real-life HR, learning, and OD professionals. The HR Uprising is about learning through collaboration and evidence-based action. We want colleagues to have the confidence and skills to rise up through their organizations by delivering real, lasting business value. Now, introducing your host, chartered psychologist, experienced change agent, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach, Lucinda Carney.
Hi, it's Lucinda. Just before we go on to this week's Masterclass, all about how to manage future potential leaders and what future potential might look like with Greg Kinnaird, all the way from Perth, Australia, I thought I'd just flag a couple of things you might like to know about. The first one is I run webinars monthly. They are completely free. And I run one for line managers and one that's aimed at people professionals each month. I ran more than that over lockdown, so we've got a huge back catalogue. If this might be something of interest to you, or if you're looking to things to support your staff, you might want to take a look at them. We'll put a link in the show notes, which you can access at hruprising.com. Or if it's easier, just go directly to the Actus website, so actus.co.uk. They're all under the consultancy. So go /consultancy and you'll see the upcoming webinar schedule. And that's where what we have running this week. So if you're listening as the podcast is coming out, on the 10th this week, I'm running one on adapting to the new challenges of a hybrid workplace. So perfect for HR or for line managers. So if people are struggling a bit, it will be full of practical tips. And then later in the month, I'm running an HR one, which is how to build an HR or learning and development balanced scorecard, because that's been a popular one from the past. So if you haven't signed up to our mailing list using that, then you might as well, because then you'll know about them and you can sign on to them if you're interested. And there's a whole back catalogue that you can access from the website as well. And then the second thing, which you can also access either from our website or you can access from the HR Uprising training, is the Change Superhero training. So I'm really excited. We've got our Change Superhero training course running. It's kicking off in a couple of weeks' time. We've got 2 places left at time of recording at the special early bird rates. So if you're keen to take part in this, and it would be great to have you, then please do take a look and sign up to that. And so that, again, you can access from Actus. It's going to be, it'll be 3 modules, but there's also a kick-off call and a closing call. It'd be really personalised. You get 360 feedback about change, and you get to work through change challenges in your own organisation in a small, intimate cohort of like-minded people. So I hope it will be really practical. I'm really looking forward to working with people on this. So a couple of places left. Say it's half price at the moment, £250 for quite a lot of content. So if you'd like to join in, do take a look. You need to sign up by the end of this week, I think, to get that pricing. So on to this week's podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the HR Uprising Podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda Carney, and this week I've got a very special guest all the way from Perth, Australia, and his name is Greg Kinnaird. Now, Greg is from Corporate Learning Solutions, and the purpose of today's conversation is to talk about the future of work 2030. He's an expert in this space. He's going to look a little bit at the research there. He does a lot of training and exploration in this area, but I thought this is really relevant because on the day of recording this, I've just finished the e-PDR hackathon. So I know that some of the listeners out there would have been taking part in this hackathon to do with the future of work. And so the thinking that Greg's going to share with us during this podcast is obviously going to be relevant. So Greg, welcome. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Lucinda. So Greg Kinnaird is my name. So I'm based in Perth in Australia, and Corporate Learning Solutions has been going for about 20 years. And our focus has been on developing emerging leaders and high potential leaders within the workplace. So something that we've identified is that there's an aging workplace demographic, and that's putting pressures onto organizations. So our niche is really working with HR professionals within businesses and looking at how can we close the skills gaps, particularly if people are exiting organizations, but also too, if you have the emerging leaders coming in, it's about how do we build up that capability within the workplace. So it's really interesting to start to consider where is the future work 2030. And it's also interesting to note that at the moment we're going through this current COVID scenario, And the way that I'm viewing it is COVID has simply crashed the timeline of a 2030. So all of those things that we're expecting to happen in 2030, we're just going through a pressure cooker situation today in 2020, and it's giving us a glimpse of what's working and what isn't working.
Well, so that's interesting. There's two angles to go down there, isn't there, in terms of what that's shown you. But I suppose if we just went back to the pre-COVID world, would you say, what would you say the difference is in terms of you looking for future leaders, 20, 30 leaders when you're working with customers right now, compared to what you might have been doing 20 years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago? What's the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to go way back to 2005. So in 2005, I was conducting a series of innovation forums. We would get 100 CEOs, HR professionals, head of departments in a room every quarter. And our focus was on the hot topics. So those hot topics in 2005, and this ran for a number of years, actually. We did a series from 2005, 2008. We looked at what were the emerging trends in the future 10 years. So we were looking already, 2015. For all of those things. And the hot topics were around aging workplace population. It was about labour market shortage strategies. It was about emerging workplace leaders, Generation Ys in that scenario. And it was around work-life balance. So they were the hot topics. So it's really interesting to have been talking, discussing, formulating what are all the trends and the predictions of what we expected and seeing it actually coming to life. So certainly the big driver that we knew what was going to happen here in Australia, but globally, was the aging workplace demographics. So globally, people in the workplace are just getting older. So 10 years ago, the average age of the CEOs that attended the innovation forums were 45. Today, now 15 years on, they're now 60. So, they may be starting to think about retiring. So this is where the business challenge is, because if they're going to exit the workplace, what they need to do is to hand over their knowledge and their wisdom and their expertise to the emerging leaders, who are the Generation Ys, remembering now that Generation Ys are like 35 plus years of age, but they're going to be the ones who are going to naturally take on board technology or pick up technology. So I think there's this real balance of handing over knowledge and information, but also too, I think there's this real growth around technology is just a natural enabler for organizations. And the balance between all of this is this changing values, which is caused by different demographics coming into the workplace. The millennials, the Gen X's, the Gen Ys, there's changing demographics, which is looking at more of a work-life balance. So people coming into the workplace are really looking at living to work, not working to live, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and is that where you're saying sort of the COVID thing has concertinaed it? Because that suddenly being able to work remotely has, many people have reported better work-life balance. So if you take out some of the stresses and strains, because you're not commuting for 3 hours a day, you could use that to do other things that's more valuable to you potentially.
Well, absolutely. So there's a whole lot of factors around here. So even if you look at leaders in the workplace to people operating from home, the biggest challenge that I thought was going to happen has happened, and that is leaders needing to let go of their egos, but to enable themselves to trust people in the workplace because they don't have line of sight anymore. So the fact that people are operating from home means a leader may perceive they don't have as much control. But it's actually not about control, it's about empowerment and it's about support. So as recent as 8 weeks ago, 8 to 10 weeks ago, we did a global survey, based on what's happening in the COVID world. And we found that different age groups and demographics within the workplace had different stress levels, but also too, depending on where they work geographically as well. So we found those people between 30 and 50 had the highest stress levels. Those people who were greater than 60 had less stress levels, but they had more access. People had more access to their leaders, but they didn't have as strong as relationship to the leaders. So there's more connection, but there wasn't as much relationship.
I mean, I can see why the demographic you're talking about would have higher stress levels in your 30 to 50 year olds, because they are the squeezed generation who, especially with with COVID. So they'd have quite senior jobs. They'd probably got 2 people working in the family. They've got kids that are not at school, that they're supposed to be homeschooling, and maybe parents that are shielded. So they've got all of those personal stresses going on, haven't they, as well? The connection thing, I don't quite get that bit though.
Yeah. Okay. So people are now working from home. They're now using Zoom, they're using Skype, they're using WebEx, they're using MS Teams, all that sort of stuff. And I don't know if you found this over in the UK, but certainly over here in Australia, we found that when people started to work from home, there's a real flurry of people just having virtual conferencing meetings, and people just got zoomed out. They just got technology zoomed out. And then about 8 weeks into that, people started to get into a rhythm. And so what they found was people within the workplace were actually connecting more often and more frequently with their managers because they're more accessible digitally, as opposed to in a flesh and blood world where they might have to knock on the door, go see a manager. But they're actually getting more airtime with their senior managers. But the interesting part out of that was quality airtime. Because what people were looking for during this time of insecurity was they're looking for certainty, they're looking for support.
So it's transactional. They're having the contact which is transactional. I do this task, whatever, but not necessarily the stuff which was how are you doing, the people, the human connection stuff.
Exactly, yeah. So the people who were working from home, they were looking for support, they're looking for concern, they're looking for high levels of empathy. Yet you had many, and I'm not saying all, but you had many senior managers who are still wanting a command and control, and they're still chasing the management by objectives and do the job. They weren't stepping back from that and having empathy or higher levels of concern for what was happening in the people's world.
Yeah.
And really simple examples of that, I've had, and this is stereotyping, but I've had some government agencies requesting people to work from home. But in the same mandate, they said to people, don't take home the computer screens and don't take home any, workplace equipment because that's the property of the organisation. But we want you to be productive from home.
That's still going on. I've seen a discussion this morning on a local HR forum, and I just don't. That makes no sense to me, because actually you cannot be productive at home for any amount of time, even 1 day a week, if you don't have a proper monitor set up. And you actually get. I personally, if I work on a laptop on the wrong height, even for a few hours, I'll end up with neck and shoulder pain for a whole week. And so it's not. I don't get it. But then this goes back to the trust thing, doesn't it?
Well, that's right, and I think that's what I think the leadership. This is the pressure cooker situations that we're experiencing today. That is really the litmus test, or if you like, a snapshot into the future. So this COVID thing is simply a tap on the shoulder for leaders, for organisations, for what the future is going to hold. So as a leader moving towards 2030, it's going to be give people autonomy, give people mastery, give them freedom. Drop your ego, trust your people, empower your people. But the critical thing with this is give people the support and the resources that they need. Because what came out of the global COVID survey that we did was the commonality of stress, putting aside the personal stresses, is technology. And one of the things that we found was the most frustrating with technology was connectivity. As in people took the laptops home, for example, but they couldn't get remote access, or they couldn't access shared files to do the work, those types of things. And then organizations had security protocols put into place where pre-COVID, a lot of organizations took out ports such as USB ports and SD card ports because they didn't want external information going into the computer systems, and so that just inhibited people to operate and to work. So
it's interesting. It's whether you start from a position of low trust or high trust, isn't it, really? And a lot of those systems are starting from a position of low trust, which is not synonymous with being effective remotely. That's the thing, and that needs to change.
Yeah. It's funny as you say that. I'm going to go way back. I'm going to do a throwback on management theory, 1980, right? So, do you? And I think it was McGregor, right, who did
X and
theory
Y
X.
theory. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So theory, it's still relevant today. So
Yeah.
we're talking, what was that, 1980s, 1970s, even before that? I can't remember.
I think it might be 60s
but
actually. Yeah.
Still relevant today. Like how many? So if a leader has a Y theory, they trust people, they empower people, which is really what's needed for 2030. If there's a X theory, then hey, people don't trust people. They need that line of sight. But definitely moving forward, and I'm going to say with the current guard, the current leadership style, and I'm stereotyping that I think it's just been so ingrained of hierarchy, command and control, line of sight, justify your performance. And that ties back into performance management, where you look at the new world that's coming in. It's not about where you've been, it's about how we're going to do things in the future. So it is about collaboration, it is about creativity. It is about creating the space, the environments for people to be able to work together.
So if we tie that in, because I'm absolutely on the same page with you about the trust thing, and you don't want to generalize, because not every baby boomer leader that's been in CEO for 15 years is a low trust and command and control, but no. There might have been a more predominance, or might have been the style. That was maybe what we were taught to do if we were in that window. When you are now looking at the leaders of the future, I suppose my question to you is, if you were assessing talent now compared to 20 years ago, are you looking for something different? So you mentioned collaboration. Is that a more important thing? Are these learnt skills, or are they natural capabilities?
They are actually. So even so, there's been a whole lot of surveys that's been undertaken. One's been through PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they actually came up with a list of the top 10 skill sets for 2030. And I'm just going to find them actually.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So with that, one of the here we are. I just have them right here. So the critical thing, 2030, that workplaces want. This is particularly from a recruiting perspective, looking at where the dynamics of organizations are heading, is they're looking for people with adaptability. Yeah. So interesting is that all organizations, the commonality will be, we want specialists, right? We want specialists. However, if you look at the skills and attributes, we want specialists who are adaptable by way of changing environments. The second thing that they're looking for is people who are able to problem solve. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing with that thing about problem solving, the connection with that is to be able to critically think. And the rationale behind that is around, there's so much fake news. there's so many different media elements that are coming into it. People need constructive thinking skills in order to identify what's real. So an example of that, and this is where I like to look within community and family just to see different thinking of different age groups. So my nephew, who is 17, we're at a family dinner event, and he's big into TikTok and WhatsApp and all that sort of stuff, right? And we're at this dinner event, and he goes, "Did you know that you can see the Eiffel Tower from London?" Right? And I went, "Are you sure?" And he goes, yeah, you can see the Eiffel Tower from London. I said, "I don't think so. I really don't think so." I said, "Where'd you get the information from?" He goes, "Well, like it's on the internet." I said, "Well, of course, everything on the internet is true, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, this is a 17-year-old, right? Now, in 5 years' time, he's going to be in the workplace."
Yeah.
And I said, "Where did you get that information from?" He goes, "TikTok." I went, "Lewis," I said, "seriously, you got to check your facts, mate." So at the dinner table, just through like on-the-job learning around the dinner table, I said, let's Google, can you see the Eiffel Tower from London? And then they validated that information at the fact that, no, you can't.
So if it's cloudy, you can't see very many things from London.
But, if I do think about problem solving, that's just a really simple example. But, in this, and again, we're stereotyping, in this millennial world, in this Gen Y world, the immediate go-to is, hey, let's just pick up the phone and let's just Google. But it's about how do you validate that information. Yeah. So the second of the skill sets was problem solving. The third one was around collaboration skills. And see, I find this really interesting, that a couple of months ago, so we're not in lockdown here in Australia, or in Perth, we're not in lockdown. We went out for dinner to a Chinese restaurant, and there was a function that was happening. We weren't at the function, we just went out as a family. But do you know how you might have, say, a larger family function, and you might have different age groups as like this family. So the oldies were sitting at one table.
Yeah.
The teenagers were sitting at another, and then the younger ones were sitting at another table. I always look at those types of things as, where will these people be in 10 years? Because will they still be behaving the same in 10 years' time? So the oldies were having a conversation. The teenagers, well, they were on the phone sharing YouTube and TikTok and all those types of things. And what was interesting was, like, the 10-year-olds down, they were basically being babysat with DVD, like the DVDs, watching Monsters Inc. and all that sort of stuff. So, if you've got the 15-year-olds coming into the workplace in 10 years' time, which is 2030, which is only 120 pays away if you get paid monthly. If you think about collaboration skills, the art of learning how to collaborate humanistically is actually being lost. So digitally, teenagers are learning how to collaborate, but the missing link is the communication and the human factor on how to work together. Yeah. And you see this play out all the time. How many times have you gone out for a walk with family and friends, and you see a whole bunch of teenagers like having a good time, whether it's at a McDonald's or in a park, and all these teenagers are just basically sitting on their devices or talking to each other on the devices, but they're not talking to each other.
I certainly think see that's a risk. Although one of the things I've noticed, I've got a 13-year-old son, and he does gaming, various things, and I hear him on the headsets with his mates, and obviously through lockdown when they stay connected. Actually, some of the stuff I'm hearing them do, they are collaborating, they're coming up with strategies, they are communicating, but they're not face to face in terms of working together. So I think they finding ways of getting there in terms of that, but it is definitely a different way of communicating. But the key, I suppose, though, there's not necessarily the empathy, which what we're saying is people need more trust and empathy, particularly in these circumstances. Perhaps as being remote, you can feel a little bit more drained of it. So although we might be able to communicate and get things done, there's still going to be maybe that lack of belonging that people need.
And that sense, and also to a sense of purpose for doing things. So my son now is 30 years old. When he was 15, they brought in computers in the classroom. So when we're talking 15, basically we're talking 15 years ago. Right? So with that, what was interesting was during school holidays, all of his schoolmates had laptops. They came around our place, and they said, we should set up a gaming arcade. And one of the 15-year-olds said, I'll just go home and get my dad's server. Right. And it was a server on a laptop, as you do. So they went home, and another one goes, okay, I'll just get my landline. And within 2 hours, they actually set up a closed circuit arcade environment within 2 hours. And at that time, I thought there is no way you'd get managers 15 years ago setting up a local area network computer system where there was 8 people sharing resources. And I went, wow, that's a snapshot into the future. And I think that is, not only where today is, but I think today leaders need to be able to tap into those 15-year-olds because they have that ability. But looking forward into 2030, those 15-year-olds are now going to be 25, and essentially they're going to be managing these other techno gurus like your son. You're coming into the workplace. So it's about how do you tap into that talent?
Absolutely. And they pick these things up so quickly. So I'm just thinking, so there's a couple of links I just want to make to our audience there in terms of our collaboration piece. So there's one thing there about collaboration, linking back to your story about the Chinese restaurant, where what we do want to do in the workplace is making sure that there is collaboration up and down the organisation, up and down the generations to get this knowledge transfer. And we won't talk about this now, but I think one of the things that HR can do is there's this thing called upward mentoring. So, it is about everyone learning. So actually can the youngsters coming in with specific skills actually mentor upwards, not just mentoring downwards in terms of transfer of skills, so we get more versatility.
Absolutely. And that's where I think about unconscious bias. So how many of the old guard will actually view parent-child type behaviours with their unconscious bias, where really what they should do is to drop all of that bias, open up the mindset from a growth mindset perspective and say, there's so much talent and opportunity coming into the organization. How can we really create environments for people to be able to embrace and tap into technology?
I see what I can learn. Yes.
Yeah.
And what's interesting though, and we must, for the benefit, particularly of my Jo Irwin, if she's listening, we must finish our list of 10 because it'll irritate her if we don't, our PwC list. But I'm thinking adaptability, problem solving, collaboration we've covered so far. Those are the skills that we need in our senior leaders in order for them to tap into
across the organizations. Yeah. So if we are looking at the future work 2030, we're not just talking about, who's leaving and who's coming in. We're actually talking about workplace culture. And if we are talking about workplace culture as being a set of behaviors that we want to see demonstrated, everybody needs to be on the same page. And, I was thinking about this today, Lucinda, that how many organizations will have strategic plans that are maybe 3 years out or 5 years out. But if you do look at where 2030 is, maybe the whole aspect about strategic plans being 3 years out will easily become redundant because the futures of change is just going to change so quickly that I think they're going to be compass bearings north, not absolute actions, because I think there's going to be so much, the pace of change is going to be so quickly that it's about how do you create the environment to be able to adapt with that. So shall we go through that list so we don't frustrate?
We might not talk each in turn, but let's cover them. And I guess we can put
they're all relevant.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, next one down is emotional intelligence.
Uh-huh.
And this is interesting that whether you look at Dan Goleman's model of emotional intelligence or Travis Bradbury, he's brought out emotional intelligence version 2.2, which I actually prefer, to be honest, is it's all about self-awareness. And what's really interesting is a lot of current leaders might be totally self-unaware of the wake they're leaving behind on others because of their unconscious bias or their I'm going to call lack of security of not trusting others to operate. Yeah. But again, if you think about self-regulation, just as part of emotional intelligence, I think that's an important thing. And that also ties into resilience as well. So I think people are going to have to learn better coping mechanisms or better resilience skills mechanisms, because as there's change going through organizations, they're just going to have to roll with the punches with that. And then, of course, with that, with emotional intelligence, there's social awareness, and then there's the whole relationship management. So relationship management, as you identified, it's not only a top-down perspective, but it's a bottom-up. It's about with the peers. And it's almost about saying, look, forget about hierarchies and matrices and all that sort of stuff. It's more of an open-source collaborative environment. Other things that were coming through, creativity and innovation. Now, the interesting, one of the things that I was licensed in was De Bono's six thinking hats as a facilitator. And Edward De Bono will say that creativity can only be creative if time and space is allowed for. And okay, so you need to give people time and space in order to think creatively. So if workplaces are busy and if they're under pressure and they're not giving people time to think differently, then how can they be innovative? And of course, innovation is about adding value to things that are new or existing. So it's about looking for pain points or frustration points to then tap into people to say, what is it that we can actually do to make a difference with that? So creativity, innovation is there. Leadership skills is another one. Yeah. And what's interesting with leadership skills, and this come out of the Deloitte's Human Capital Survey. So Deloitte's found that there's going to be gaps in leadership skills because of changing demographics, but the big gap is going to be through engagement and inclusiveness. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so because of the changing working environments, people are not going to feel engaged, they're not going to feel included. So a fundamental leadership skill is, not so much the management aspects of how to do things, but it's about the leadership aspects of how do we get people involved. And what I've noticed recently, this is in Australia, I don't know about UK, but there's a real push about implementing psychologically safe environments. And I think there's a connection, and this is coming out of Gallup's work, Gallup's work about creating psychologically safe environments. And I think this is coming out because of changing demographics.
Yeah.
That as people are coming into the workplace, they want to feel safe, they want to feel nurtured, they want to feel that they can put forward ideas without being shot down, which is an old master servant mentality of, children should be seen but not heard.
Yeah.
Like that unconscious bias has got to be let go in order for people to feel safe, in order to get the best out of them.
You need to have this open-minded leadership in terms of feeling you can learn from others, that are your growth mindset, all of those sort of things, and it's not this autocratic style, basically.
Yeah. And look, and we can go back to classic models such as situational leadership that says basically that, and this is Hershey Blanchard, that says there's no such thing as leadership. Like, that's their fundamental statement. There's no such thing as leadership. There's only followership. But if you do think about followership, it's about how can the leader identify where the development level is of the follower, so that they can then serve that follower to develop the competence.
Yeah.
So I think fundamentally that's on there. So leadership is there. Digital skills is there. And I find this really interesting. So, and you've probably found this as well, Lucinda, like if you go back 12 months ago, I bet you haven't conducted as many video conference sessions as to what you have in the last.
I learn a new thing about Zoom every webinar. It's like, oh my gosh, people have written on the screen. That's amazing. They've put hearts and things on there. How do I delete them? Quick, let's work out the controls. Yeah. So, and again, this is what we've got to look at the opportunity that's coming out of COVID, because again, how often do you get a real life case study that you're actually living in? Like, we're just living in a real life case study that in 10 years' time, this is going to be reality. Yeah.
And, and the way I see it is people went from typewriters to computers, right? And people are going from computers into just picking up smartphones, and we don't even think about, checking our emails, checking our calendars on the phone. So if I think about technology is just going to be another tool. Yeah. And again, that's why aging demographics need to be able to tap into those children that were sitting at the Chinese restaurant, who have just been brought up with it, because
who show us how to use things. My son, like the weather app on my phone, and I said to my son, I can't I'm full of all the destinations. I can't get rid of it. And he said he just naturally went swiped to the left to delete. It didn't occur to me. I was clicking on it. I was, so they've got intuitive ways of interacting with the technology that has to be explained to me at a more conscious level for me to work out how to use some of them.
Absolutely. And even if you look at one of the current frustrating factors, that we're finding here in Australia, and I don't know if it's in the UK, but I can remember sending my very first email in 1996. I don't know if you can remember the exact date when you sent your first email, but I remember 1996, I had to phone the person up to say, do you have an email? So I had to phone the person to ask if they had an email address. And then I sent my email to them, and then I phoned them up to say, did you get that email? And so today, like, that's not even existent with any of that. But if you do think about digital technology, it's about, so where I was heading to with that is, I've been brought up with one system, one mode of communication within the workplace. Today, there's, Microsoft tends to be the common platform. You've got Yammer is another platform. You've got organizations that are using a different video conferencing. You've got some organizations that are actually including WhatsApp. So there's all these different sort of modalities. And one of the observations that I'm finding in workplaces is there's too many modalities of communication that people are just starting to get confused. Yeah. And what I'm seeing overseas when I do overseas work is WhatsApp, that is like an informal, I see it as an informal piece of communication, is actually quickly becoming a formal piece of business communication, where contracts are being attached to WhatsApp and all that sort of stuff. And I'm thinking, gee, there's real business risks.
Yeah, it's not that secure. Yeah, gosh, no, but you can easily get confused. So, which thread was it that I had that communication on, or where did I have that conversation with somebody?
Well, again, and that's where I look at current family environments, right? So, so we've all got nieces and nephews and all that sort of stuff. So even if I think about my mum and dad, I still phone them on the landline, right? They do have a mobile phone, but I need to remind them that a mobile phone it actually means you need to take it with you when you go out of the house.
It's mobile.
Or at least you need to have it charged up. But even if I look at my son, I communicate with my son by text.
Yeah.
So he's 30. If I look at my nephew, who's 17, text, no, I don't communicate with him by text. I communicate with him via WhatsApp and Facebook, because he's only just got on Facebook. But if I look at my other nieces and nephews, I have to pick my modality.
Yeah, true.
Is it WhatsApp? Is it Facebook? Is it LinkedIn? For all of those. But I think, again, I think that's an opportunity of, you got all these people with diverse digital skills. This is the 70-20-10, isn't it, of learning?
Yeah.
People are learning like your son who's doing digital gaming. There's a whole lot of skill sets that he's picking up informally that he's just going to bring into the workplace.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it's about us tapping into that.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got 3 more to go out of the 10. So that was number 7.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, sorry, there's number 6. Number 7 was risk management skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's more than health and safety risk management skills.
Well, there's also a lot to do with tech, isn't it? Being aware, alert to data, breach things there, and also just risk management. Now, going what we were talking at the start about, people working at home. And it's not necessarily about breaching data stuff, but just physical risk. There's quite a few. There's quite a lot of ways, aren't there, in which we can.
Financial risk, but also too, there's brand risk as well. So you think about
use of social media risk, yeah.
Well, okay. Look at it from a recruiting and selection perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. So back in the day, submit your CV, 200 get shortlisted down to 5, final 3 come in, and congratulations, you've got the job. Okay. Now, particularly in this COVID environment, submit your CV, go online, do a video interview. So even as part of that video interview, what's my brand in the background? What are you seeing and not seeing? But in the US, a growing trend in the US is that people are actually going to people's social media to validate how do they interview and what do they say, and how does that compare to their personal life that they represent within the social world. And then, are they going to be a fit ethically and brand-wise to the organization?
That's interesting. That's about the person, but there's also the things like Glassdoor and the way in which you treat candidates in terms of, reviews. We're in a world of being able to review people. You can have a huge risk if you don't let candidates know that, if you don't treat them well with the recruitment process as well. So there's 2 ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Brand risk.
Yeah, exactly. So if you do think about risk management, it's also about personal brand, but also too, it's about corporate brand. Yeah. And, very quickly, a corporate brand which is connected to shareholders. So take, for example, Elon Musk, right? So Elon Musk was on a podcast with Joe Rogan, who's a UFC fighter. Yeah. And whilst he was there, he lit up a marijuana joint and had it with on screen, and his share price has dropped. So if you think about...
Where was this? I'm going to look that one up.
Yeah, have a look at it. Yeah, so
seriously.
Hey, look, it's on TikTok. It's got to be real, right?
Right, yeah.
No. But if you do Google it, it is there. Yeah. And there's a big uproar because, his SpaceX was about to launch. He's talking about, he's all of his different projects around, batteries and all those types of things. And his share prices just took a plunge on it. But again, risk management. Yeah.
Misjudged.
So, and again, you tie that back into emotional intelligence. Where's his self-regulation?
Yeah. We won't get on to American politics, but my mind is straying in that direction. But we'll keep going.
Exactly.
So we've got
2 more to go.
Go on then.
Okay, 2 more to go. The other one is a focus on STEM. Okay, so STEM skills. I don't know if you have
science
that in
tech.
the UK.
Yeah. Science tech.
Engineering.
And machine? No,
maths.
No. Maths, thank you.
Maths,
okay.
Yeah. So it's science, tech,
clever stuff.
And maths. But interestingly, over here in Australia, they're creating STEAM, right? So they're going science.
AI?
No, actually. So it's science, tech, engineering, arts, right? So arts and also maths as well. So what they found was with the STEM, it's all left brain stuff.
Yes.
But they're starting to introduce, the arts, so it's also right brain stuff.
Right.
And it's funny, as I'm saying this, I reflect back to Singapore 20 years ago, that they consciously introduced arts into Singapore because they found that, again, this is stereotyping, right? But I can validate it through stuff. So just trust me on what I'm saying. That what they wanted to do, they knew that Singapore knew that it wanted creativity to happen in order for it to prosper, because Singapore doesn't produce anything. It's only got its intellect, and it's only got its particular hubs. So what it encouraged people to do was to go out there and investigate the arts in order to build the left brain. Now, the survey that I'm going to say that backs all of this up, right, came from a HR review, and they looked at the semiconductor industry, and they used MBTI, looking at supervisors and its connection to innovation. And what they found was, where they surveyed 3,000 people that worked in the semiconductor industry, something like 70% of leaders at that time were ISTJs. So what that means from if you don't know Myers-Briggs,
STEM people, basically introverted, process organized, but you're more classic geek. I mean that in a positive way, with great research.
yeah, true. But what came out of that was they found that they wanted to be innovative, but they needed to know how to be innovative. Like, that was their learning style, that was their approach with all of that. So anyhow, so just going back to the other skill set for the future, it is about the science, it is about the technology, it is about engineering, it is about the maths. But from an Australian perspective, I'd also just add, it is about the arts and the conversation and the collaboration, the communication, because that's the human factor in all of this. And the last point was entrepreneurial skills. Currently, you and I might know this as just business acumen. There's some sexy words coming out as you want a person who's an entrepreneur. Basically what so if I think about it in those terms, basically you just want somebody to come into the workplace, have a passion for what they do, they own it, they're committed to it, they want to see it through, but they basically want to see its implementation. Because an entrepreneur basically wants to start stuff, they want to finish stuff, then they want to hand it off and then go on to the next project. So to me, that's really where it's about, how do you develop this entrepreneurial mindset?
It's people taking personal responsibility for driving change as well. I think that is one of the things. And I think one of the things of all of this is that actually it takes a multitude of skills, doesn't it? It's about work. If you go back to collaboration, because and your ISTJ, which clearly there are 15 other types, and some people love Myers-Briggs and some people hate it. When you were talking about things like adaptability and collaboration, well, that would be much more of an N, the opposite type. So someone who's naturally ISTJ is not naturally going to be adaptable personality-wise. They'd have to learn to do that. So you can see how we do need to have flexibility and work with other people who have those strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with that, different industries are going to attract different people. So, as you know, different industry, different jobs attract different types of people. But I think it's about the leaders, and let's just say the CEO, the head of departments, when they do the strat planning, starting to think about the creation of the environment to allow that to prosper. So let's just say you had a workplace full of geeks. And yes, to stereotype me, let's just say we had a workplace full of geeks, right? Essentially, it's about the organization creating environments to enable them to flourish, right?
Yes.
And that might actually mean putting in place set, regimented routines where they can come to those environments, such as regular hackathons. You mentioned hackathons with CIPD. Okay, every Thursday we're going to do a hackathon. It's going to go for 2 hours. Here's the agenda. ISTJs, geeks will love that, yeah?
Yes, because they've got the time to think about it and still be creative, but they've had that warning.
Absolutely. And now if you go to the other end of the spectrum, so let's just say we've got this innovative, creative, sales, marketing sort of environment. That type of environment, regimented, routine, linear environment would just, it'll stop the creativity.
Yeah.
It'll stop the creativity. Mm-hmm. And this is where I always find it interesting about open plan offices and closed plan offices, that people either love them or hate them. That, people that are more introverted will tend to hate open plan offices because of noise. So what they do to stop the chaos of the noise outside of their head is they'll put in their headphones and their music. Yeah. But so here's the company that's wanting to create more open communications, yet the environment itself is actually shutting people away. in their own silos or cubicles or earpods, just so that they cannot be disturbed, which is creating silos. So I think it's about the whole strategy around that. Yeah.
So, I know we kind of slightly went off, but it was quite interesting going through those 10, and we can put links to any of these on the show notes if people want to look up your sources. If we went back to, would you say though, so you've been doing this sort of future leader assessment, were they the right skills 15 years ago, or are they just the right skills for now? What skills are not so useful now that were looked for before?
Yeah, like I'm going to go back. So let's go back 40 years ago, which that sounds like a long time ago. Yeah, you go back 40 years ago, 1980-ish, it was all management by objectives.
Yeah.
Like everything was management by objective. And then, you go 1990, all the managers and leaders would go away on a 3-day retreat, and then they'll start handing out chocolate frogs. You're doing a good job. Here's a chocolate frog. Not to say they were actually doing that, but you know what I mean? Then it started to come to that reward. And then that became patronizing for people. Yeah. Particularly they saw there was favoritisms and things like that. So I think the skill sets of 10 years ago that are out of date is the command and control mentality and the line of sight mentality that I'm your boss, you report to me, like respect your hierarchy. And even right down to how the performance management cycles are done. You know how you got the performance management cycles, and usually people will be, scored. Where I think definitely the new world is more around the communication and the connection, the collaboration, and it's about creating communities. So it's not about. So currently it might be about the results. Okay, do this to get the result. I think moving forward is going to be part of our community. We have a purpose. Let us work in collaboration, and it's our collaboration that will just get us the results. So rather than the measurement of the outcome, I think the measurement is going to be about the collaboration, and the results will be there. Like it'll have to be there from a business perspective, but I think the emphasis will be about building the culture and then allowing that to happen.
Okay, so because I was going to say, what does this mean for HR professionals? And maybe that's part of the answer in terms of culture or enabling things. What would you?
Yeah, actually, it is. It's worthwhile downloading if you can. It's worthwhile downloading the 2 reports. So one is the PwC Workforce of the Future report. It's about a 42-page report, and it actually specifically goes into that about the HR challenges.
Yeah.
So organisations will change, right? Just by way how it's going to change. The commonality that comes out of that is around learning and development. It's about how do you close the gaps on skill sets? How do you get people to be accountable for their own skills development, for all of that? But also too, it's about, because the organisation is going to have to be flexible and adaptive, it's about how do you have the core group of specialists who are going to work together. And then from there, how can you then call in other people to then support the projects? Because the smaller the organisation, the faster it will move. So then it's about how do you have those specialists, but then how do you have the generalists that then support? Then once that project is closed out, they can then move on to another project for that sort of stuff. So from a HR perspective, one of the things that Deloitte's found when Deloitte did their human capital survey, there was 13 big challenges, but what came as number 5 as the biggest challenge was HR systems keeping pace with organizational growth and change. So again, that's worthwhile looking at. Like if you go Deloitte's Human Capital Survey 2019, and there's a type in dashboard, they actually have it broken up by regions, industries, business sizes. And so basically a lot of HR systems are out of date.
So it's almost, so where you came, less about the performance piece, but it's more about the talent management and giving people the opportunities to develop their careers and empowering people, that sort of functionality.
Well, yeah, it's about you and I. So it's people like you and I. Yeah. So it's people like you and I working with the CEO, the CFO, people truly seeing that people are their greatest asset. So in the UK, do you still have investors in people?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Australia tried to kickstart that, but it didn't get off the ground. Yeah. But if you think about investors in people, it is about people not having those words or not having the plaque in the reception, but it's about leaders truly understanding that to invest in their people, they're going to stay.
It's about living it rather than just getting the badge saying that you live it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the future and for me, the current mindset is, I think the words are there. I think in 10 years time, if you look at so look at the 25-year-olds today, because I'm doing a lot of grad programs with global organizations. So for me, I get to work with grads that are 25 to 35. And what I'm observing is they naturally include each other. They naturally respect each other. They naturally respect diversity. Yeah.
Yes.
They naturally, like all of that is very natural.
Yeah.
So in 10 years time, when those 25, 35-year-olds are 35 and 45 and they're the leaders, that's going to be the environment that is naturally going to happen. So I think it's about how do we start to integrate that today, because there's so much value that's coming out of that. So
we're going to have to we'll have to find out how do we leave this. There's so many things I'd love to return to, but we're all up to time. What would your final thoughts and points be, I guess, for our audience?
Yeah, okay. Well, there's a couple of things. So I'm going to give a final thought to where I'm using all this information for my business, because I'm always working 10 years ahead. Yeah, for all of those.
Yes.
So I always look for where the trends are. So hence I am recommending to people to download the PwC.
We'll put the links in the show notes for them. Yeah.
Yeah, good. The Deloitte stuff is there, and I'm not saying they're the only ones, right? But what I do like about their work is they've gone out global, and they have gone out to different industry groups, and you can validate information. You can make up your own mind. So for me, where I'm positioning my business as a HRD specialist is my 4 main areas is about developing high potential leaders, because that was identified as the big issue out of all of these reports.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the first thing I'm looking at. The second area of focus that I'm looking at is about engagement and inclusiveness. So when I go into an organization, I say, okay, let's focus on developing the leaders. Fantastic, great. Now, let's go into your department and let's actually talk about how we can engage with your team in order to get them involved. Yeah. So we start to have a look at that type of stuff. And then from there, at a higher level, we then look at the organizational effectiveness, facilitation stuff, what's working, what isn't working, where's the duplications. And as a matter of fact, there's an event that I'm about to host, which is with a government agency. And essentially there's an IT department. They're going through growth because technology is a driver. They've got about 150 people that work within this IS area going out to governments, but they're not on the same page, right? So there's confusion. So it's about how do you then bring it all together? And then the fourth area that I look at is talent management and succession planning. Fundamentally around the fact that people are going to start retiring. And I think this year, and I could be wrong, but I think that this year is the first time that Gen Ys and Gen Ys have equaled Gen X's and baby boomers in workplace.
Wow.
So yeah. So in the next 5 or 10 years, you're going to find it's going to be like a 70-30. So what I find really interesting is working with the graduates, because for me, they're my customers.
Yes, absolutely.
In the future. But on that, what I'm also starting to think about, I'm 59, 10 years time, I'm going to be 69. I love what I do. I'm starting to think about technology. How does that play out? So there's some really interesting stuff, with technology and coaching, and so I'm starting to think
how you can make your next change into your next role, and not necessarily going to leave the workplace, but maybe just change the way you work.
So I think, okay, so my final words are for HR professionals, do your research. Basically, do your research. There's a lot out there. Engage with the current clients to see where they see the future. And I think from a HR professional perspective is just ask them, how can you close the gap?
Yes. And looking at those skills and using those skills. I think when you're looking at the evidence, there's that second one of us about problem solving, critical thinking. We need to make sure that we are leaders as HR and develop these skills ourselves in order to be, influential in the future workplace ourselves. Absolutely.
And look, without a doubt, technology is the driver, but it's the human factor that drives technology. And for me, I think that's the role that we play as HR professionals, is we close the gap between bits and bytes, because we create the development of flesh and blood.
100%.
And that's our job. Okay. So that's it's
100%.
been really interesting chatting with you, actually.
Greg, it was great talking to you. Thank you so much for and the weekend has started for you. You really can have that glass of wine now, can't you, if you want to? Not for us, it's early on a Friday morning here. But thank you so much. If people want to get hold of you and connect with you, how would they find you?
So a couple of things. They could Google Greg Kinnaird. That's one of the easiest ways of doing it. They can go to my website, that is www.corplearn.com.au. That's there, or email greg@corplearn.com.au. If you want, I can send that detail through to you, and you can put it in the show notes.
Yes, that's probably the best thing to do. And any of your social media links as well, that I'll get them to do that as well, if that's okay.
Cool.
Brilliant.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Greg. It's so good to have you on.
Good. Stay safe and keep on washing those hands.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Greg, take care. Have a great weekend. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast. You can access more information, including resources or links mentioned in the show, at our website, www.hruprising.com. Also, you might want to join our LinkedIn community or tweet to us at HR Uprising. We'd love to hear from you.